Yes, and welcome to C3Arts Radio. This is not your lonely host. I'm not really lonely, I can't say, especially when I have my right-hand man here, Mr. Winston Brewington.
Yo.
But I am your loyal host, right? And we are the broadcast arm of the City College Center for the Arts. Philip Harvey's here, right here with Mr. Winston Brewington. And we come live and direct to you every Tuesday right here, C3 or WHCR 90.3 FM, of course, the voice of Harlem. And we are here to make sure that you are aware of the people, the happenings, the events, everything that makes up this great world of the arts that is out there. And it's a big job. I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. What do you think, Jay?
I think so, man. You know, we're pushing through. We're pushing through. You know, it's not easy, but someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it, right? It's a hard job, but somebody's got to do it. And added to that, we really think it's important. We are your source for arts advocacy. But as the broadcast arm of the City College Center for the Arts, it is our duty to make sure that you know what is happening here on the campus of City College and also on the stages of Aaron Davis Hall and all of the other places of cultural and life that we have to offer here at City College Center for Arts. We try our best here and think we do a pretty good job. Now, coming up, Aaron Davis Hall, this Thursday, 2 days away, ladies and gentlemen, we have GlamourTango, a celebration of women in tango. Now, we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, kind of building up, making a crescendo until the day is here. And we're just about there, ladies and gentlemen. We got 2 more days, just this Thursday coming up on March 29th. There are going to be 2 shows, right? 2 shows, 12 p.m. and 7 p.m. Now, what's happening here? Okay, well, tango probably caught your ear right from the beginning. Well, this is going to be more than satisfying for anyone who falls under that category. We have Uruguayan pianist and producer Polly Ferman, and she's returning with this program, but she's expanded it even. It's called GlamourTango. It is an all-female multimedia music and dance show that pays homage to the women who quietly and sometimes not so quietly wrote the pages of tango from the very beginning. It's going to feature musicians and vocalists and dancers from Argentina and Uruguay. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. If you are familiar with Miss Polly Ferman, you know that she's a fantastic pianist, but you also know that her shows are powerful, extravagant to a sense, as you might expect, and all around enjoyable. Again, the name of the program is GlamourTango, a celebration of women in tango. And it's going to happen Thursday, 2 days from today, ladies and gentlemen, March 29th. 2 shows, 12 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Okay? So please go to citycollegecenterforthearts.org to reserve your tickets. And come check us out. We got 2 shows for you. You can go to one during lunch and one in the evening. You may want to go to both. After you see the first one, you may want to see it again. It's that good, okay? So go to citycollegecenterforthearts.org and make sure you get your tickets. Now, today, C3Arts Radio, you know how we do. We have a wonderful, wonderful show lined up for you. We have a very, very special guest today. Mr. Raymond Codrington is going to be joining us. He is the executive director of High Arts, one of the most dynamic cultural organizations and really mechanisms for social justice and that we have not only here in New York City because they are a very national organization, and we're going to get into it. Mr. Raymond Codrington is going to be joining us in a moment here and tell us all about it. So stick right there, C3Arts Radio. We're going to get into a little music and we'll be right back. C3Arts Radio.
your minds and souls, so you can lead yourself to peace. I got a real objective here. I am effective here, cause I select a clear method for all suckers like all that fall wrong into the pit of purgatory. I go for glory, I'm taking inventory, counting all the tough luck ducks while I narrate, relay and equate, dictate and deviate, cause my fate is to be co-making history. I use sincerity, but I still very deep doubts and questions of all the skeptics. I'm kicking clout and I leave and bet this is true. There's nothing so-so, cause I know right about this minute, I'm in it, admit it, I did it for you. Cause this is what I'm into. So chill while I instill that we almost fulfill the proper mission for us. And yo, this is a must. To these lines are my rhymes I attest. These are the words that I manifest. I manifest. Take to the words that I manifest. Take to the words that I manifest. I suggest you take a rest for the words I manifest. They will scold you and mold you. Well, I impress upon you the fact that I use my tact app, rhyming, climbing, and chill while I attract that girl you're with. I got a sincere quality. I give her all of me, cause you're too small to be trying to rip. So let me uplift and shift my gift. Let's go to the fullest capacity. I got tenacity, because I have to be the brother who must live and give with much insight and foresight to ignite, excite and delight. And you might gain from it, or feel pain from it, because I'm ultimate, and I'm about to let off. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding, truth, recoup. So won't you throw a hand in the air? Put up a peace sign and please find it. Though we're feeling good, we should, we could, we would. Stop. Think for a moment, okay? And then sway. Well, I convey that we must do away with all the stress and the strife. So God bless your life. Use kindness and never blindness. And you will find that this perspective is best. Check it out. These are the words that I manifest. I manifest. Lyrics to live to, righteousness rules. So I'll forgive you this time, for you are being very ignorant. That's insignificant, I guess you figured it. Hope to be dope as me, I G you flee. Because the pressure's too much for you. I'm your professor, I got the touch to do more than the rest. Confess and can't compete. I'm elite, I'll defeat, delete and mistreatment, mincemeat of other fools. Cause I'm the brother who'll snatch up the funds and make lonely ones. I meant it really, cause I'm clearly obsessed and these are the words that I manifest. I manifest. Take to the words that 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 I manifest.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We are always back right here, C3Arts Radio. Now, you know, we're here every Tuesday, right here, WHCR 90.3 FM, right here, 5 to 6 p.m. during your drive time. But it doesn't have to be your drive time because you can check us out online. We're at WHCR.org. That's where you can live stream us. And also, what is it? What else are we on? TuneIn.com. TuneIn.com. You can check us out there too. WHCR, our call letters, of course, there as well. And you can always check us out online. Come visit us. We need more followers. I keep saying this. We need more followers.
Follow us.
Yeah. At C3Arts Radio. That's on Twitter and Instagram, C3Arts Radio, Facebook, and also the most beautiful website in the world, of course, that is C3ArtsRadio.com. All right. So, we have a very special guest in the studio today. Now, a little while ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago or so, about 4 weeks ago. Was that 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago that Christopher come and joined us there in Winston?
Wow, I think that was about 4 to 5 weeks ago.
4 to 5 weeks
Yeah,
ago, man.
yeah.
Time goes by so
It does, man.
fast. And we had a very, very fascinating talk with the great Christopher Rivas about who the real James Bond really was. And we figured out that real James Bond was Dominican. And it was a fantastic program. And that program was brought to you by a very, very special organization. It's called High Arts. Now, if you have been around as long as I have been, as old as I am, then you know that High Arts was formerly known as the Hip Hop Theater Festival. And since it has not so much transformed, but it has grown and evolved into a very, very dynamic organization, which recently moved into its own home in the El Barrio, at Art Space PS 109. And they are coming off of a very triumphant performance at the Kennedy Center. But this is just the latest in a long line of very strong programming that really also touches upon a lot of kind of societal issues beyond my usual use of the term cultural. A very dynamic way of understanding and comprehending, and then kind of seeing where the arts fits into all of this. Now, today we have the leader of that charge. That's right. The executive director of High Arts, Mr. Raymond Codrington, is in the studio with us today. How you doing today, Raymond?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
It's very interesting, and I was kind of pointing to it there for a moment about watching over the years since the Hip Hop Theater Festival and its beginnings, and then seeing how things have evolved in a sense, because it's not necessarily transformation. The seeds of the Hip Hop Theater Festival, of course, are still there and will always be there. But there's this kind of underlay of it there where we're really making not only just the observations of the artists themselves are making about the world around them and their place in it, but also how we're also looking at how organizations can really be transformative in their space. And we were talking a little bit off air, Raven, about some of your background. How did you come into this? I know that you have a very, very background, fantastic writer, and you've done a lot of work around both internationally. I know you did some work with writing, work in Bermuda, over in the UK. How did you come to the leadership of an arts organizations? Was this something that you were always kind of had your foot in as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I started off from an academic background, so getting a doctorate in cultural anthropology.
Right.
But I felt as though in my research background, what really got me interested in anthropology allowed me to use it in a research context was looking at the globalization of hip-hop, looking at how black youth, primarily West Indian youth in London, were using hip-hop to define their own ideas about race and class, and that was really through the lens of American hip-hop, more specifically rap, and really looking at the relationship between black America and black Britain.
Yeah.
So,
and you come up with a lot of fantastic comparisons, very interesting comparisons there as well. And it was the first place where I ever came across the term common sense racism.
you dug deep, man.
I was like, that makes sense right there. I saw that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the other side to this is that I was actually born in England.
Okay.
So, and I moved to the States when I was 9.
Is that right? Okay.
So I was born in Nottingham, England, and I moved to Galveston, Texas.
When I was about 8.5. A little contrast.
Yeah.
Right?
So, you know, anthropology, I think, at the core is really focused on comparative work and comparative cases. That's a big part of anthropology. So you want to be able to compare culture to understand it better. So just growing up, going between, I would spend my summers in England and the rest of the time in Texas. So I kind of had this thing going back and forth in my mind. My parents are Jamaican. They moved to England in the 50s. So I had a bunch of cultural issues and questions that I had to solve for myself, and anthropology really allowed me to do that.
Right.
And then over those travels, over that time, say from my from 9 to my early 20s, started seeing more hip hop in the UK. So I wanted to understand what was going on. And when you're in England, or at that time, the presence and influence, and it's still of the States, of the U.S., is so strong. Like, you grew up with it as kind of the second and third kind of language, and it becomes imbued or interjected into your cultural makeup. So, I think there's a lot of American-isms and a lot of Black American-isms in Black British culture. So I was interested in those links.
Do you find there's a lot of comparison there? I've spent some time, a little while in London, and maybe about 6 months. I had kind of an extended stay there. And one of the things I found is there was a lot of discussion about the comparison. There was a comparison about the Black Briton, so to speak, and the Black American. And I know you get to a lot of that. Are these comparisons that you totally derived from your academic sense or your study, or were a lot of these kind of colloquial kind of comparisons that you might?
I mean, it's a little of both. I mean, I think that when you have a research background, there's literature, bodies of literature, and previous research that you draw on, and I think that you try to, as a researcher, add something to that. So you have to kind of shout out what came before you.
Right,
you have to cite, obviously,
absolutely,
what came before you, but then you're also trying to put your own perspective on it to understand from your own point of view, and base it in your own set of issues. So for me to look at the whole idea about how people form ideas about race and class by using hip hop, offered a lot of comparative context, but also allowed to drill down and really look at the situation with Blacks in Britain and the different ways that racism manifests itself, the different ways that race and class come together to produce culture. Because I mean, hip hop is the production of a number of cultural, political, and social issues that come together at one time in one place.
Right.
And similar things are happening across the world. So you want to be able to, in the one sense, look very specifically what's happening in London, but also be able to pull it out to a broader context and look at this in a global context. And it's within a context of hip hop that I did that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see, or one of the things we might do, just in a kind of general kind of, not necessarily a lazy sense, but make distinctions between a culture that grows up under colonization versus a culture that grows up under segregation or apartheid, in a sense. Do you think that this was something that really kind of affected, or how might that, I know it's a very kind of loose way to put it, but how might that impact the growth of a culture like hip hop?
Well, I mean, I think that, in England, it's a different, they have Black British history and the Black presence is very different from the U.S. So there's not such a relationship to,
and they're different from each other, right?
Right.
You have the West Indian, then you have the African, and so on.
But I mean, for me, I felt as though Black British culture was very fluid. So every several years, there was a new form of music coming up, whether it be garage, jungle, drum and bass, grime, and then hip hop was kind of going in and out of that. So they were sort of, it was almost like a lattice. They was coming in and out of each other, creating new forms, but building off previous forms as well. Put trip hop in there as well.
Yeah.
So
sure.
There are very localized versions of hip hop, and then derivatives of hip hop, and then new versions of music. They're all coming together at the same time. Or coming together at the same time, or building off each other and building progressively. So I think that was interesting. That was one of the things that I felt as though in my mind, I felt as though Black British culture was very transient and evolving very, very quickly.
Very rapidly. Yeah,
demographics making a difference too. So when you have Africans, West Indians, and then you're out there, and they're collectively trying to figure out what Black British culture is, throwing the American with it, and it's actually an interesting cultural mix that leads to different kind of cultural movements and formations.
I think it's very interesting. Like you're talking about all the different ways, something that we might call in the States at the time where a lot of this kind of electronic music was going on. We might just say drum and bass or something. But in the UK, you had all these kind of formations of it. And sometimes people would say that was really a heavy imprint of the powers to be, so to speak, to kind of break the music up into these little things and then kind of sell off these portions of really what was a very similar sound. Do you think that's something that was unique to the British Black culture?
I don't think it's unique. I think what's unique about Black British culture is, I mean, for me, maybe it's because I'm of West Indian background,
Mhm,
but
sure.
I kind of locate things in the in sound system culture
Mhm.
and that
Wow,
and that battling,
Right.
and and it's the same similar ethos
Uh-huh.
in hip hop. So for me, there's more continuity,
Uh-huh.
but they're just different sort of versions of a kind of a broader model that's based around sound system culture, based around battling,
Mhm.
based around wanting to be the best, competition,
Mhm.
which most of those musics have that in them, and a
Right.
very oral toasting tradition,
Yeah.
very DJ driven. So in one sense, I mean, they are broken up commercially, but I think there are continuums to them, and I think that artists recognize those as well. I mean,
Right,
if,
okay.
if you do your
Right,
homework,
gotcha.
if you know enough about the evolution of the music, you can see the continuity
Mhm.
between, so it's less broken up.
Mhm.
But I mean, definitely from a commercial perspective, they
Yeah.
tried to do that, and I think attempted in some ways, but I think at the
Yeah.
core of it, it's an oral culture. It's a sound system. In a lot of ways, it's underground, going through pirate radio stations. Although now you have the internet, but back then it was on your estate, making music for a very small, relatively small group of people. That
Uh-huh.
this is how these musics came up and sprang up, and then spread from those very small sort of groups and supporters. So it's fascinating. I mean, I find the sort of the
It
Black
is.
British
It
culture
is.
and the evolution of it.
Yeah.
Really fascinating, as well as African American culture.
Yeah.
Black culture here too. So shout out to all my people, all Black people.
We'll get that
I don't
shout
want to.
out
I don't want
there,
to.
yeah.
I don't want to make those same distinctions you're asking me about. You know what I'm saying?
with that whole thing, I got you. So, one of the things is kind of interesting. Do you see that distinction in the music largely, or in the kind of other ways that we might express the culture in terms of hip hop? Do you see the differences where it's expressed differently? If you understand my question, something we could see where the music, while there might be difference and changes in the music itself, but in the other parts of the culture, for example, the way that it's portrayed, the way a b-boy might carry himself in London as opposed to here in the States or in other parts of the world. Do you think there's something which is distinctive, that something that kind of adds to the narrative of hip hop beyond the music?
Yeah, I mean, I think and from a cultural perspective around hip hop, that's what you want. You want that localization. You think about it as they used to call it global, and local at the same time. So, so to think about it as, okay, so there's a hip hop template, and then it's kind of localized, and the local conditions are being talked about, for example, in the music. The local dialect, the accent, the slang, that's going to show up in the music. There's going to be unique moves, in b-boy and in hip-hop theater. There's a great artist named Jonesy D, who,
Jonesy D, yeah.
he absolutely he's one of the early voices
Right.
in hip-hop theater, and he's from London, and his lyrical theater, lyrical theater, that set it off in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and he's still doing his thing, and he's a b-boy, just hip hop head extraordinaire, in multiple elements. He's a double, triple threat.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about hip hop in a global context, I think wherever you go, whether it be, Rio, whether it be Havana, Colombia, U.S., London, there's always that kind of local way that people flip it, because you have to, because
Right.
that's the whole idea about hip hop, is that you want to represent who and what you are and your own experiences. When that's not happening, then I think you're talking about something else that's maybe hip hop derived or related, but from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think it has to be local, right? It has to reflect the people that are indigenous to that area. Yeah, absolutely. So I know you've done some work in Bermuda as well, so in the West Indies as well, and I know this work gets right to issues of maybe social disturbance, or you were looking at some of the ways, or doing an assessment maybe of current society in Bermuda and what kind of racial dynamics were playing there. Did you see that as tied to the arts in some kind of form or fashion as well?
Well, so I was doing that work. I was working at a think tank called the Aspen Institute. And Aspen is a so they name and frame big issues. So I was working at a policy program called the Roundtable on Community Change, and we were interested in issues related to structural racism and dismantling structural racism. So looking at how policies, practices, and cultural representations came together to produce and reproduce inequality and racism. So, you know, a lot of words and a lot of terms coming together, and there's a big heavy titles of how do you dismantle structural racism, and if you think about it, you feel like, oh, the world is oh man, what can I do? So we'll try not to go so deep in that. But so it was a project where we're bringing together nonprofits, private sector, as well as the government, to help them develop strategies so they could go to their spheres of influence and start to dismantle structural racism in their own, so like I say, spheres of influence. And we'd convene them, and I managed this project. It's been about maybe 2 years. So, you know, I think the arts and culture came into that project when we really looked at what was going on with young people, because oftentimes, you know, young people were blamed for the ills. You know, it's a familiar story.
Right.
So, you know, we've got these young people. They're idle. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything with their time, and they're listening to this rap music. They're listening to this reggae music, and it's quote unquote corrupting them. You know, putting them on the wrong path.
Right.
So
Blackness.
culture became this kind of boogie person or force that was influencing young people negatively.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, we didn't get to the point where we could use the arts as a point of intervention. For us at that time, that particular project dealt with a lot of documenting what was going on, and understanding the role of culture in these wider discussions about race and racism, because oftentimes culture became a kind of stand-in for race.
Yeah.
Sure. Kind of the two became conflated. So I think that was I won't say theoretical project, but it was a lot of documenting and trying to get to understand what was going on and giving it to people in Bermuda so they could, you know, have the literature, have the documents to have the conversations. But in terms of using arts as an intervention, kind of the way we do, I think more so at High Arts, we really didn't get to that point yet. But you know, Bermuda's an interesting place. It's a very unique place. I mean, it's 21 square miles. I think it has about 50,000.
Yeah, I was
people,
here this past summer, and then just driving.
Yeah.
On the regular day, you can just
Yes.
kind of drive the whole island.
Yes, you can. And you know, I think there's a certain you know, they've got their own, you know, it's like every other place. They've got their own history. They've got their own civil rights movement. What's unique, I think, is that they have, you know, they've had black-led government for a while, and it's a predominantly black country. And at the same time, I think the seeds of institutionalized power and wealth are concentrated not in the black community. Right. So it's an interesting dynamic, and they have this whole sort of expat financial services. I mean, you know, they're one of the biggest offshore holdings for companies, insurance. Yeah, you know, insurance companies, reinsurance companies, financial services. So there's a lot of wealth there on the island. So that leads to some interesting dynamics.
Sure.
And they did not want anything to upset the social order in Brooklyn, in Bermuda, to scare off any of these companies. So there's a whole
Gotcha.
discussion going on.
Hey, we're just getting started here, ladies and gentlemen. C3Arts Radio. We're going to get into a little bit of music, and we're going to give a little shout out to the Save Our Lives. Is that what it was called?
It's the March for Our Lives that happened this past Saturday.
The March for Our Lives. That's absolutely right. It was very, very powerful not tribute, but a demonstration. It harkened back to a lot of things, but it's very, very special in its own right. So we'll be right back here. We have Mr. Raymond Codrington with us, and we'll be right back. C3Arts Radio.
My name is Naomi, and I'm 11 years old. Me and my friend Carter led a walkout at our elementary school on the 14th. I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper. Whose stories don't lead on the evening news. represent the African American women who are victims of gun violence, who are simply statistics instead of vibrant, beautiful girls that full of potential. For far too long, these names, these black girls and women, have been just numbers. I'm here to say never again for those girls too.
When people try to suppress your vote, and there are people who stand against you because you're too young, we say no more. When politicians say that your voice doesn't matter because the NRA owns them, we say no more. When politicians send their thoughts and prayers with no action, we say no more. And to those politicians supported by the NRA that allow the continued slaughter of our children and our future, I say get your resumes ready.
Grandma, your generation believed in talk, scared of the very steps in which you walked. Hey, Father, listen to all that was said until depression set in, leaving mouths unfed. And then you came along and tried to use your own head and think another way. Oh, but the thought was deep within your mind that you would soon be free one day. But it was just a mere thought, because you decided to live and came me with a brand new thing and all types of different views. And after you rejected me, we became the front page news. We were fighting, crying, dying, bleeding for a cause. We wanted freedom, justice, and equality. These were our laws. Let me tell you, this is the lost generation. This is the lost generation. Let me tell you, this is the lost generation. One more time, say it now. This is the lost generation.
Come on. Yeah. You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Always back right here. WACR 90.3 FM. This is C3Arts Radio. Lloyd host Philip Harvey. And we are in the studio with Mr. I'm sorry. I was gonna say Mr. I said it already.
Just
No,
just so
Mr.
polite, man. That's cool, you know.
Raymond Codging,
Y'all are very polite.
the executive
home
director
training.
of
Good.
High Arts. And we've just got into the conversation. We have a lot more to go. We haven't really kind of scratched the surface on what really the breadth of High Arts and this organization and such. So I would like to start here, Raymond, and pick up here. Your transition from doing the kind of work that you were doing before, kind of policy work, academic work, into moving into leadership in the cultural arts. What moved you in that direction? What made you decide to go that path?
Sure. Well, when I finished graduate school, I worked at a museum in Chicago, the Field Museum.
The Field Museum, of course, yes.
And then I did a couple of years at the Natural History Museum of LA County. So I was still familiar working in cultural institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had, done some academic work, research, and taught for a little while. And then the policy work. But I think when High Arts came up, so the opportunity to lead an arts organization and to make that I don't want to say crossover, but that transition from studying culture to being a part of making culture was something I really couldn't pass up. And, I think that when you're a person of color, you're a black person, or however you define yourself, I think it's important when you see those opportunities for leadership to take them, and it's really dope to be able to affect change, to make decisions, to have resources, to be able to make culture and support artists that are doing important work.
Sure.
And it's a range. It's a range of things that, in terms of content and subject matter, that we have historically dealt with at High Arts and the Hip Hop Theater Festival. So when I saw the opportunity to be able to carry on the legacy of the Hip Hop Theater Festival as both as an organization and as a festival itself, and then also think about what's the next step for the organization? What kind of artists do we want to work with? What kind of conversations do we want to support, be a part of, and where are the conversations? Where can we play a role in bringing those discussions forward and supporting those artists and giving them resources that they need to tell those stories? So it was very exciting, and the organization has had, we're 18 years old,
right?
And starting as the Hip Hop Theater Festival and really looking at issues of social justice, cultural expression, but really at the early stages, or for most of the time of the organization, giving voice to the hip hop generation. And then being able to continue that legacy, because hip hop is always, it's going to be us. It's in our DNA. We're not trying to get away from that.
Right. Sure.
But then also pivot a little bit and think about what are some other kind of conversations and other artists that we can work with and want to work with. It was just too good an opportunity to pass up, and it's always nice to be in charge of stuff.
Yeah, to be the boss.
Boss.
It's you think of High Arts as a very efficient and effective incubator for the arts. How do you kind of bring artists under your umbrella? Is it we might think just offhand, of course, it's a certain level of skill, it's a certain level of consciousness. But what are the kind of deciding factors when you have quite a few people that you're looking at who may tangentially be working on similar issues or be at a certain level of expression or a certain level in their career? How do you make that decision?
I think it's a mix for us. We work with established artists, we work with emerging artists as well, and we have some ways that the artists can work with the organization. Primarily we're doing a lot of residencies, so supporting artists for a period of time and giving them resources so that they can move their work to that next stage of development. And that's something that we're finding, the opportunities for artists to develop work are becoming fewer and fewer, because a lot of times people are expected, the artists, to have the work already fully cooked and ready to go. But there's a lot of work that goes into producing
absolutely.
a piece, you know, a theater piece, a piece of music, and you often don't see that. So we provide that opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's through our Critical Breaks artist residency program, and it's a critical break.
Yeah.
It's a critical break in the work, and a lot of times that piece. So when Chris came to us, Chris Rivas, who was the real James Bond, was Dominican. He was able to move that piece along, and hopefully now it will be presented on a bigger stage. The idea is that it's moved creatively and artistically. It's in a different place than it was before it came into high art. So there's that. We do co-productions. We do productions. We produced the Peculiar Patriot by an artist named Lisa Jessie Peterson, who's phenomenal. She also just had a piece at Joe's Pub last week, and that dealt with mass incarceration, the criminal justice system. So from a macro and micro level, she's been doing work in correctional facilities with young people and adults for about 17 years. So the play was really a mashup and amalgamation of visits, as well as a very interesting critique and observation around criminal justice and what it does to families, individuals, and communities. So that was with the National Black Theater. And then we do, also one of the ideas for us is that once work goes through high arts, it has a pipeline. It has a trajectory so that it goes somewhere else. So you mentioned earlier the work at the Kennedy Center.
Right, sure.
So we're actually curators and residents for hip hop culture at the Kennedy Center. And one of the opportunities that we've had is to take that critical breaks work, or artists that are in critical breaks, and present that work also at the Kennedy Center in D.C. So that's a bigger stage, big different audience, but really elevates. Not necessarily you need the Kennedy Center to co-sign your work and for it to be legitimate,
absolutely.
but it just gives the artists additional exposure.
It does,
and it gives high arts additional exposure, and they get to work with a different level of resources, a different type of exposure. And so we're very interested in supporting the artistic development process, as well as supporting the work of artists and trying to push them and help their careers. But you asked the initial question is how do you decide? It's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably the most the most difficult aspect.
But it's a good kind of problem to have, because you get to review a lot of work, and we try to be diverse in what we pick. Most of the work in some way deals with social justice related issues, identity, race, politics, inequality, LGBTQIA issues. And some of the work is also, from aesthetically, we have work that we traditionally want to hold on to in that hip hop aesthetic. So we have hip hop artists and hip hop. We have a theater company in residence right now.
Sure.
Called Truth Worker, who are a hip hop theater company. Excuse me. So, we have a curator in residence that's helped us really shape our residencies, but then also helped us select work and bring artists so we can have a selection process. We can compare work. We can see what fits in. We look at our seasonal, or we look at the year and kind of see, okay, what kind of subject matter is being dealt with. What's the artist's aesthetic? Where does this put us as an organization to be able to be involved in certain kinds of conversations that we may or may not have been involved in before? So it's part science, part art, no pun intended.
And part magic.
Part magic. We tried, but that's I think that one of the best parts about the job is when an artist hasn't been on your radar, and you put out an open call, and then you see the work, you review it, and they come in and they kill it, and you're like, wow. There's it feels good to see that kind when
that's
new
like
and fresh.
When you're doing your job.
That's one of them. Or you walked in and you see a packed house.
Right.
And you're
sure.
like, this is nice.
Sure.
It's the way it's supposed to be.
Now, I think of not only as high arts as being something that kind of brings artists to fruition, but you've worked with a lot of artists that seem to espouse a certain kind of consciousness. We can go down the line: Saul Williams, of course, the rapper Nas. We have the Black Panther Chadwick Boseman. That was one that I wasn't that familiar with at first at all.
I'll tell you a funny story about that.
Yeah, it's all right. Please tell us.
No, it's interesting. We had some students come in from Loyola Marymount in L.A., and I was talking to them about people that had come through the festival, come through the organization, and we have this 2003. We have a hip hop theater festival poster that's signed by all the artists. And the other day I was just looking at it. I was looking at the signatures, and it's been up for about 2 years. And in the top right-hand corner is Chadwick Boseman. Right. Chad, man, we need some checks, bro. Contact him. But it's just interesting. But you brought up the point about who's come through the festival, the organization, and the festival itself. You know, it really has been an incubator and a jumping-off point for a lot of artists. So and I have to shout out the founders, Clyde Valentine, Danny Hogg. Camilla Forbes, who's smashing it. Who used to be our producing artistic director, who's at the Apollo right now. So.
Absolutely, Camilla's a good friend of the show.
Yeah, so we've birthed and supported, and folks have had some nice careers come out.
Absolutely. Now, the Hip Hop Theater Festival, it in and of itself as a program, it still exists. So you just had it at the Kennedy Center, but it's been in other cities as well.
Sure. So it was in the Bay Area, Chicago, New York, and DC, and we still do the DC Hip Hop Theater Festival. So it'll be 18 years this year. And the idea with that is we partner, I think we've always partnered with the Kennedy Center in some way, shape, or form. And then we work with smaller cultural, and everyone's pretty much smaller than the Kennedy Center.
It'll get a lot bigger than that.
We work with other try to spread it out across the wards.
Sure.
Across the city to provide different kind of programming. So it's not just so Kennedy Center based, but
But I like, as you said, you do provide kind of a bridge to the Kennedy Center. That really is, and we've been kind of joking, I've been kind of laughing about it. But as a stage, it really doesn't get much bigger than that as a kind of a platform for the artists, and that High Arts actually is able to give artists that opportunity. Where do you go from there, right? You just take that to another level. So it's absolutely fantastic in so many ways. And this program that just recently happened at Kennedy Center, was that part of the 18th kind of celebration of 18 years of High Arts Hip Hop Theater Festival / High Arts?
Yeah, it wasn't quite a celebration. Excuse me. See it more of a kind of a culmination of the work that we have a pipeline that we can actually direct artists that. You've been doing work with High Arts in New York, and there's a place for the work to move after it comes through High Arts. So that piece was Chastened Measurely by a really, really dope playwright by the name of Shanaka Hodge, who's just a beast. I mean, she's just incredible. And the piece looked at based in the Bay Area. He's from the Bay Area, and it was looking at the community and individual reaction to the Oscar Grant shooting. So that kind of Fruitvale Station kind of moment in time when Oscar Grant was shot on the Bay Area Rapid Transit, the BART system, and it dealt with an agoraphobic individual that wants to come out and quote unquote meet Officer Measurely, the person who shot Oscar Grant. And we did 2 shows, the March 9th and 10th. First one was nearly sold out, second one was sold out. But, I think for us, you do, I'm the ED, and I'm looking at all this happen, and, we worked to put that relationship in place and maintain it, but it's actually pretty dope to see your work at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think for us to be able to give other artists those kind of opportunities and those kind of looks, that's where we want to be positioned. And, but in relation to the Hip Hop Theater Festival, in last July, when we were there, we did 4 performances at the Kennedy Center. So we try to mix it up. So we try to keep that as a part of the festival, but then also, like I said earlier, work with the smaller cultural institutions, arts organizations in the city, and kind of bridge that gap, those gaps.
I also want to say congratulations on the opening of PS 109 and this permanent space. I know a lot of organizations, especially that specialize in theater productions, and having that space. What does that mean to High Arts to have this space now?
Yeah, I mean, it's really allowed us to put a footprint down, and when it's our first permanent space that has significant performance potential and space, right? Because I mean, even in New York City however many cultural institutions, arts organizations there are, there's just not a lot of space.
Yeah, exactly.
To produce and create work, and whether you want to be rehearsed, develop, present, there's just not. It's inaccessible to a lot of people. So, for us to be able to provide that access to our artists has been great. The actual move has been it's been phenomenal for us. It's allowed us to be under, kind of bring everything under one roof. Before PS 109, we were actually across the street on 100th Street between 1st and 2nd. So now we're on 99th Street between 2nd and 3rd. We were working out of a gallery.
Yeah.
That was about 650 square feet. And we had offices on either side, and we had a visual art space. So in addition to theater, we've been talking about theater and performance a lot, but we also have a visual
we
arts.
haven't gotten to a lot of
visual arts
some of the
component
other
to the work.
Components,
But PS 109, it allows us to have our office space there, and then we have a black box theater, and there's a dance rehearsal space, and there's also a visual arts gallery in the building. And that building is actually interesting as an anthropologist. I look at it as a cultural experiment.
Yeah.
Because you have
multiple organizations,
4 arts organizations that are renting space there. You have performance space, and then you have 90 apartments, all artists.
Yeah.
Living there, and it's in an old public school. It was built in, I want to say, 1894, closed in 95. It's on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah. It is.
But you have, it's kind of like all these artists living in this building, multi-generational. You have studios to 2 bedrooms, all forms, all disciplines, and then you have these arts organizations, and then you've got this performance space, and it's a model that is being replicated across the country. I think they did one in Buffalo. They're opening one in New Orleans in April, and they just opened one in El Paso, Texas. But it's been great for us. We also have an apartment that we can put artists up that are coming in from out of town. So it's a nice little creative ecosystem for us. Okay. And it's made our work more efficient. It's allowed us to plan out further. It's allowed us to take some calculated risks. Yeah, sure. So we have space, guaranteed. And I think that particular part of Harlem, whether you call it the Upper East Side, Yorkville, the bottom tip of El Barrio, I think it's important for us to be over there. We're on, not just we're on NYCHA property. Yeah. We're surrounded by public housing, and for our work, it just fits. It's just like a nice synergy. Given the geography, given the building, having that permanent space to really to think in and to be creative in has been it's been great for us. It's been everything.
Absolutely.
So to speak.
Fantastic. Before we get out of here, Raymond, can you give the URL and how the best way to interact with High Arts?
Sure. We are at www.hi, like hello, hi -artsnyc.org. So hi-artsnyc.org. So you can hit us up at info@hi-arts.
Okay, sounds good.
nyc.org to get information. Check our website. It's pretty comprehensive in terms of what we've done. You want to take a look at what we've done, and also what's coming up. Sure. Really accessible calendar. We just did our website. You want to check it out. It looks good.
It's a nice website. Good. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thank you. That's the best way to find out what we're doing, what we've done, and what we're going to be doing.
Okay, sounds good.
And just check us out.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I keep saying Mr. Codrington, but Raymond is what I really
Ray is
want
fine.
to say. Ray is even better.
This was dope. Thank you.
We're getting out of here. C3 Arts Radio will be back next Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, see ya.